as you've been reporting for years, the whole war on terror has been a fraud from the beginning.
Hey guys, thanks so much for tuning in. I'm really happy to be able to get Harley Schlanger back on the line for a number of reasons, not the least of which is as insanity envelops the globe, it's great to have a like-minded friend and historian that we can count on to help us decipher the madness. Harley, welcome back. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Good to be with you, Sean.
You know what, Harley? We didn't even do a pre-call here. We're just going to dive right in, and we can start wherever you want to. But I have a litany of notes here, and at the top of my page, I've written, all roads lead to Syria. Where would you like to begin? Because, you know, one of the things that I'd like to talk about is the fact that Putin and Russia have presented evidence that Erdogan and Turkey are deeply involved in the ISIS oil trade, and yet you're not going to hear the Mockingbird mainstream media in the United States talk about that, are you?
Well, first of all, when you talk about the mainstream media, I think it's important to recognize that people are turning to you and similar sites simply because they're not getting the truth, and they know it. But I'll tell you one thing that I'd like to start with, which is really interesting. You and I have been talking for quite a while about the need to impeach Obama or to use the 25th Amendment to get him out. And of course, so many of the listeners say it'll never happen, you can't do it, it's idealism, it's utopianism, it's foolishness. Now, in the last couple of weeks, because of the confluence of events, the bombing or the shootings in Paris, the bombing of the Russian passenger jet, the bombings in Beirut, the attacks in San Bernardino, and the obvious lies coming from Obama, where Obama says one day ISIS is contained, and there's a report now that's in today's Daily Beast, which says there's an 8-page report from the intelligence community saying not only is it not contained, but it's growing in numbers and spreading internationally. Obama comes out and says the day before Thanksgiving, you're safe, we have no credible intelligence of an attack. And then he tries to cover up the fact that the San Bernardino shooting was a fundamentalist attack, probably tied to the Saudis and his great allies. So as a result of this, we're seeing a shift in the thinking about Obama. And this, even in the mainstream media, two real Obama supporters, Richard Cohen of the Washington Post and Dana Milbank of the Washington Post, wrote columns last week, and they said there's something wrong with Obama. He's not eloquent. He's petulant. And Cohen even said he seems to have lost his voice. The next day in the Washington Times, Charles Hurt wrote, it's not his voice that he's lost. It seems that he's lost his mind. Now that's somewhat mainstream media. And then he said, someone call the Speaker of the House and let's dust off the 25th Amendment. Then you have Democrats, Tim Kaine and Senator Murphy from Connecticut, Tulsi Gabbard, a very heroic woman, an Afghan war vet who's a Democratic congresswoman from Hawaii, who's essentially saying Obama's conducting an illegal war. And so we're beginning to see the potential. What's missing is enough of an avalanche of outrage from the American people that would impel some of these people to act. Now, just one final point on this. The other thing we're seeing, Sean, is whistleblowers in the intelligence community, in the military, pointing out the lies that Obama is telling. People like the Doctors Without Borders, who refuse to accept his so-called apology. We're seeing whistleblowers release the drone papers that show that when Obama says there are no civilian casualties, he's lying and he knows it. So we're in a new phase which is extremely dangerous. But all of this goes back to the very bold action that Putin took to essentially say, you want a war on terror, let's have a war on terror. And it showed that, as you've been reporting for years, the whole war on terror has been a fraud from the beginning.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that, Harley, but let me just back up. I do want to talk to you a little bit about the San Bernardino attacks and the Paris attacks, because I think I heard you say, and I let you finish because I respect you so much, I think I heard you say that Obama is sort of covering up the fact that this was Islamic or Muslim terror. Correct me if I'm wrong. That's my takeaway on what you said there. But what we have to stress, because the Mockingbird mainstream media will not stress it, is that in Paris, we know on the record there were drills happening of the exact same scenarios happening on the exact same day. There were drills happening in San Bernardino with crisis actors, and then the first responders were able to switch from drill to real world. We see it time and time again. In Harley and San Bernardino, we saw eyewitnesses say 3 shooters were responsible. And early that day, we saw the mainstream Mockingbird media report there were 3 shooters. And one woman says there were 3 shooters with athletic builds. They were white, she thought. And to me, Harley, that sounds like Special Forces PSYOP. So I'm beginning to wonder, you're familiar with Operation Gladio, of course, Harley, NATO's
Sure.
Operation Gladio. I'm beginning to wonder if Gladio-style terror attacks have come to the West.
He had a huge assault rifle, and he had extra ammo. He's coming ready for something to reload. I don't know. He had like magazines. I couldn't see what else. I just saw 3 dressed exactly the same.
You're certain that you saw 3 men?
Yes. It looks like their skin color was white. They looked like they were athletic build, and they appeared to be tall.
Where I was at right here, we seen there was 3 white men in military fatigues taking off.
What were they driving?
It was a black Impala, like SUV, or yeah.
You think that they might have been the shooters?
Yeah. The way they were driving, yeah.
And I guess I do want your opinion. Do you think Operation Gladio-style attacks have come to the West?
Well, that's a possibility. I don't have enough to be certain on that. But these idea of false flags as an excuse for a crackdown is definitely a possibility. And as many people did note initially in San Bernardino, the initial reports and then the reports of these 2 people don't coincide. They don't make sense. So there may have been something else that happened there. But in the long run, it's still, whether it is so-called Muslim terrorists or NATO and CIA dirty operations, the effect is the same. They're going for endless war.
Right.
They're going for police state in the Western countries, a removal of all freedoms.
You're right, because that's what they got out of the Paris attacks. Regardless of what happened in Paris, and I believe it was a PSYOP or a false flag of some sort, I believe it was orchestrated. I think the Mossad may have played a hand in that along with other intelligence agencies. Regardless, the New World Order powers got what they want. They're cracking down in Paris. They're removing liberties. It resulted in French airstrikes in Syria. It's getting these NATO countries to come on board and to continue with these endless wars, even when these countries haven't previously wanted to be involved. So they're getting what they want out of these operations, aren't they?
The other way to look at it is that whether it's actual NATO forces or proxy forces that are Islamic fundamentalists, they still come from the same source, the same funding, the same networks. The role of the Saudis and the Turks, who are the leading funders. The Turks are the leading funders of the Muslim Brotherhood, which Obama tried to put in power in Egypt. And the Saudis are the leading funders of ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And Obama is totally tied to the Saudis and the people who control Obama, the financial operations, whether you call them the Illuminati or whatever you want to call them, they represent the controlling force of the places that are funding these operations and making them logistically available. So whether it's an actual false flag or whether something that is predictable, if you put arms and extremists in conditions where they can act and then tear down the defenses so there's no defenses until after they act, then you have the same effect. You terrorize people and you create the basis for a police state.
Yeah, that's right. And, you mentioned that no matter what's happening in these events, the result is the same. Even if it was Muslim extremists, which I'm very dubious of, Harley, we've just seen this too many times before, where these operations in real time unfold under the cloak of drills. The drills go live, the official story is in place a day or 2 later, and it never resembles the initial reports that we heard. But you're right, because we know that Obama wanted $5.3 billion for Syrian rebels to fight the Islamic State. And, what are they really doing in Syria? They're trying to topple Assad. How do we know that? Because Putin wants to take down the real ISIS, and the Pentagon says, no. And the Pentagon says, oh, we're going to strike ISIS. And then they drop leaflets to the rebels warning them about pending U.S. airstrikes. All of this is now in the open, Harley, on the global stage, it's all in the open now. That's the good news, is that the whole world can see what's going on here.
This is really the important thing, because in order to have these things be credible, you do have to have enemy boots on the ground. You do have to have terrorist operations that are functioning, whether they're in Iraq or whether they're in Paris or whether they're in the United States. They do have to recruit a certain number of people to provide a cover for this. So even if it is all false flags, the fact remains that the threat from so-called Islamic terrorism comes from the White House. It comes from the CIA. It comes from British intelligence. And Putin called their bluff. And the most recent example, which you just referred to, is when Putin went to the G20 meeting in Turkey and showed aerial photos of these long lines of convoys carrying oil. And he showed the before pictures, and then he showed the after pictures after the Russians bombed and destroyed close to 500 of these trucks. Now, the question that he posed is that since Obama had said 14 months ago that the United States was going to take down the financing of ISIS, why did they not do anything about these trucks, these convoys that were run by ISIS? They stole oil from Iraq and Syria, transported it across ISIS-controlled territory in Syria, and then now there are very credible allegations that they cross into Turkey, and the oil is transferred to a company run by the third son of President Erdogan of Turkey. Now, note that the Russian jet that was shot down by the Turks occurred in the area where the Russians have been bombing these convoys. And so Erdogan is protecting his family income as well as the Turkish support for ISIS. And Obama then immediately jumps in to support Erdogan. And one other part of this picture, Hollande, the French president, who's mostly a nothing, but he came to the United States to say to Obama, we've got to work with Russia. And he went back with his tail between his legs. He met with Putin then, and Putin said, here's the situation, here's what you've got to do, you've got to work with us. Then Hollande went back to the NATO meeting, and all of the NATO countries came out after that meeting with Obama's line, which is that you can't work with Russia because Russia won't take out Assad. So, as you're saying, it's all in the open now. What remains not in the open is a serious opposition force in the United States that's public. Now, the fact that we're seeing some people coming out talking about Obama losing his mind, about the lies, about the U.S. support for these terrorists, which, of course, you and I have been talking about for several years. This is all part of a real picture which goes against the official Washington narrative. Now, enough people see through that narrative. We've got to have determined and consistent action to bring down this administration.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with you, Harley. You know that. But I think Woodrow Wilson got it right when he said, he was talking about some of the biggest, most powerful men in the United States, and he said, they're afraid of something. They know that there is a power somewhere so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they had better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. And whatever he was talking about, be it the Illuminati or the banksters or the secret societies that are all tied in together running this global plantation, whatever it was that he was speaking about is still firmly in control today. And the reason I'm pushing just a little bit on this impeachment of Obama is that I don't think it matters, because what's the alternative? A Zionist rabid dog like Lindsey Graham, who gets free reign on CNN to go and to continue to parrot points, talking points for Israel about how we need boots on the ground. He wants to put American men and women in Syria in harm's way, and there's going to be body bags coming home. And I'm sick of it. I'm sick of this endless war on terror, which we all know is a Pentagon-created ruse, a bankster-created ruse. As our friend Michael Rivero has said so many times and so eloquently, all wars are bankers' wars. And it's just endless insanity. It's absolute lunacy, Harley. And I don't think impeaching Obama is going to fix a damn thing.
Well, here's the way you have to look at it, though. You're right. There's a power way above Obama. Obama's just a puppet. He's not even a very good puppet anymore. In Paris at the climate change conference, his teleprompter broke down and he couldn't speak. He was just mumbling for 15 minutes. And when he did say something, it was complete nonsense. You know, I don't know if you saw this, Sean, but the former deputy director of the CIA, Mike Morell, told Charlie Rose, when Charlie Rose said, "Why didn't we ever bomb those oil convoys?" And Morell said, "Well, I think I've been told that the president was worried about the environmental devastation of blowing up the oil tankers." So there is insanity. But here's the point. If you don't fight it, you'll never beat it.
No,
and you're absolutely right. You've got Lindsey Graham, you've got a whole crew on the Republican side, and you've got Hillary. Hillary's the same thing. And in terms really of foreign policy, there's not much difference between Bernie Sanders and O'Malley than Hillary on these questions. It seems as though you have a British, Israeli, Saudi dominated political arena in the United States, which you do. Mm-hmm. Now, what do we do about it? Do we just point to it and say they're too powerful, we can't do anything? Or do you start going after the vulnerable flanks and use that to educate Americans with the assumption that there are people in the institutions who are not immoral, corrupt bastards? And I'll give you an example of that. We're seeing, as I said earlier, people in the military coming forward, like former DIA Director Michael Flynn, who's openly saying that the administration is lying, the intelligence reports are doctored, the U.S. was not caught off guard by ISIS, it willfully created ISIS. He's taking a risk to do that. You have the whistleblowers, the 4 people who released the drone papers. These are people who could end up in jail for 20, 30 years.
Yeah, they had their accounts shut down, apparently. And some reports are saying that they had their banking accounts shut down. Because if you speak out against this monster, you get punished.
Well, and that's going to happen until you slay the monster.
I couldn't agree with you more, and we do have to fight, but the way I'm fighting is by exposing the Zionist puppets that are beyond the pale at this point, and John McCain is one of them. You know, we hear Lindsey Graham say that this Islamic woman pledged her allegiance to Baghdadi before the San Bernardino attacks, right?
And she pledged allegiance to al-Baghdadi before the attack.
And have we seen any pictures of her? Have we seen any surveillance of her shooting people or on the run or getting shot? Have we seen anything other than that stupid airport photo that they pulled out, which is reminiscent of the 9/11 pictures of the terrorists? So what we get is Graham saying she pledged allegiance to Baghdadi. Oh, is that the same Baghdadi that John McCain met with, that we have pictures of McCain meeting with in Syria, right? I mean, it's just lunacy. And what we have to do, Harley, and you guys at LaRouche, is we have to inform people about the traitors within our midst. And Obama's just one side of the puppeteers. I mean, Obama's just one of the many puppets. These people are aligned against absolute freedom and liberty, and I'm on a rant here because I think the Paris attacks were a psyop. I think the San Bernardino attacks are a psyop. There are multiple agendas being met with these operations. And again, I come back to the idea that Operation Gladio has come to the United States.
Well, it was in NATO from the early 70s to the present. It never left. Mm-hmm. And it was being run partly out of Langley, Virginia. So it's already here.
Yeah.
You see, here's the thing you got to look at. If you want to go after the people who have the real power, the ones who choose our candidates, the ones who use the media to divert people from reality, you have to do 2 things. One is you have to show people what reality is. And that's what you do, that's what we do at LaRouchePAC. But in the process of doing that, reality starts to catch up with them. I mean, how many lies can be told before people realize they're being lied to? Mm-hmm. But then you come up with the other question, which is, do you have a strategy to bankrupt and defeat the people who are behind the Obamas? And that's why what LaRouche had emphasized for quite a while was Glass-Steagall. You've got to bring down this financial system, which is the power base for this illegal global conspiracy. Mm-hmm. This gang of plutocrats who think that the rest of us are just useless eaters and pawns that can be played. What happens when the pawns stop being played? When people stop falling for this? Mm-hmm. We're seeing that. You know, you look at the polls and they show Trump with a big lead in the Republican Party. All that reflects is that there are fewer and fewer people who are voting who actually tell the pollsters who they're going to vote for. There's no support for any of these candidates. You think Hillary Clinton could win a fair election?
No.
Or Cruz or Rubio? The one good thing about Trump is he's made Jeb Bush into a laughingstock.
Yeah, that's
It's
for
helped
sure.
to do that.
Yeah, Jeb Bush and the Bush cartel, the criminal crime family called the Bushes, the Clinton crime family. These people have been exposed. But I tell you what, I'm going to get back to Lindsey Graham just for one more time, because I got to tell you, I saw a video where Lindsey Graham was berating Ash Carter and one of these Pentagon generals, like absolutely berating them like a bully, and then interrupting them every time they tried to respond. Not that Ash Carter's a good guy, but Lindsey Graham is a made man. Lindsey Graham is one of these power brokers that, I don't know, sold his soul to Israel or whoever it is that he sold his soul to, but this guy can get away with anything, because honestly, Ash Carter and that Pentagon general being treated like that, those guys probably walked out of there and said, we ought to kick that guy's ass, because he was so disrespectful. He's a bully. He's a Zionist bully, and I'm calling these people out. I'm not going to pussyfoot around anymore, Harley. These people are absolute traitors to the Constitution, and it needs to be said. And you're right about Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton. They're a joke, too. They're puppets, and they have sold their souls to this monolithic power that Woodrow Wilson spoke about.
On Lindsey Graham, look, what this guy represents, first of all, he's in negative numbers in the polls. But he's not there to be president. He's there to help shape the narrative.
That's right.
That's what he's doing. Now, who does he represent? It is this Anglo-Israeli-Saudi operation. This was the whole line that took over the neocons around the Iran negotiations on the so-called nuclear bomb for Iran. What you have is the Sunni jihadists, the hardcore Netanyahu crazies, and the Caliphate Turks are working hand in glove with British intelligence and U.S. intelligence. That's the operation. Now, their whole power base is their global financial cartels and their control over raw materials. This is what Putin and Xi Jinping of China are threatening. If the American patriots would wake up, they would realize that Putin and the Chinese are our allies right now. They're moving to bring down this financial system. And that's why we're on the verge of nuclear war with Russia. The one general said the other day, one inadvertent blip on a radar screen could lead to launch on warning. Tulsi Gabbard asked Ash Carter in one of those same hearings, she asked him, why do we have air-to-air missiles on our planes that are going over Syria and Iraq when ISIS has no air force? Who are they targeting? They're targeting Russia. The narrative of the Turkish jet shooting down the Russians, that was over Syrian airspace. The Russians were in Turkish airspace, if they were at all, for 5 or 7 seconds. This was a setup to put, again, more fear in people that we're about to have a war and therefore you have to give up everything. But I think if we look at what the Russians and the Chinese are doing, what the BRICS Bank is doing, the idea that we're seeing a move toward the renminbi, toward multiple currencies and away from the dollar, because the dollar is the empire. This is a really moment of great potential. And who can we target on this? Obviously, Obama's a puppet. Biden's a puppet. They're all puppets. But you've got to start somewhere, throwing some of these guys out and making an example of the potential power of an awakened American public against these banksters.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And I just want to segue back to Putin real quick, because you brought him up, and that was my next question for you was, is he the real deal? I believe he's the real deal. I just did a video the other day called International Truth Bombs Are Being Dropped, and cited Putin as being one of the most outspoken people on planet Earth against this monolithic beast that Woodrow Wilson spoke about, right? Which at this point we can, point the finger at the Pentagon, at Obama, the White House, the CIA, the secret societies, the intelligence agencies, the banksters. But Putin is speaking truth with the evidence of the oil trade between ISIS and Turkey. He is speaking truth at every turn. He's speaking with common sense. See, that's what's resonating with people around the globe. When he speaks without a teleprompter and with common sense. He speaks from the heart. He speaks with knowledge. Now, I did that video, and one of the regular commenters over at SGTreport, Glitter, said, Putin's a puppet, he's in on it. And Harley, I said, if Putin is a puppet, he's a hell of a lot less helpful than Lindsey Graham and Obama and John McCain and Hillary Clinton. So if Putin's a puppet, he's not a very damn helpful puppet at this point, because he is speaking truth and speaking common sense to the globe.
People who are worried about whether Putin's a good guy or a bad guy, have to go back to one question, which is, what is he representing? And what Putin will say is that he's representing Russia's national interests. And Russia does have national interests. One of their interests is to defeat the terrorist insurgency, which will target him. Chechnya, Ossetia, these are areas where U.S. intelligence have been creating ISIS allies. There are somewhere between 5,000 and 7,000 Chechens who are being recruited and trained in the ISIS and Al-Qaeda camps in Syria and Iraq. So Putin is serious about destroying ISIS. Now, on the other hand, look at the United States. In 14 months, with thousands of sorties, we have nothing to show for it except an expansion of ISIS. So if you merely take that as a starting point, you see there's a fundamental difference between what Putin is doing and what the West is doing. And Obama is obsessed with Putin. He hates Putin. He froths at the mouth when the word Putin comes up. Same with Hillary. Look at Marco Rubio, says Putin's a gangster in a criminal country. You know, these are people who are the real paid operatives. And if any of them get in the White House, we're going to be seeing a fifth consecutive presidency controlled top to bottom by these gangsters, these international financial oligarchs.
Yeah.
So the only thing you can do on this is, you're right, expose it, tell the truth, get people thinking.
Well, I just want to jump back in here real quick and just say before we lose you here, I want to circle back to Putin, because I think Putin can certainly speak more truth and be heard more by more billions of people than you and I ever could. And I wanted to ask you this about Putin. You say he's got Russia's state interests in mind. He said it himself. He also has Christianity in mind. He's a hardcore Christian, I believe an Orthodox Christian. He's trying to spread Christianity back throughout Russia. He wants a resurgence of Christianity in Russia. And as far as I can tell, Christianity is not a bad thing on planet Earth. And I want to ask you this. Do you think that Putin recalls what happened to Tsar Nicholas II and his Christian family, who I think reports might back up the fact that the Rothschilds played a role in the murder of? So do you think that the man is actually truly a Christian and is truly doing the right thing and is truly standing up to the New World Order? Because I would argue that the evidence suggests that he is.
Well, you just pointed to an important point, which is history. Putin understands the history of Russia. They have repeatedly been allies with the United States, against the British Empire mostly. And Putin's personal history is shaped by the invasion of the Nazis of Russia. His father nearly died. Before Putin was born, his father was nearly killed with the Nazi siege in Leningrad, and an older brother, who of course he never met, died during the war because of the diseases that were spread because of the siege. So he has this sense of history, of what happens when Russia is not strong, and when literally Western fascist forces impinge on Russia, as we're doing today. Now, the other point you're making, of course he knows that the bankers were involved in the Russian Revolution. The British were heavily involved in the initial overthrow of the Tsar. The Germans and the British were involved in the imposition of the Bolshevik regime. They did everything they could to control it. You know, Stalin, who was not a good person, Stalin also understood the British role, and one of the reasons he killed so many of his top comrades is he suspected they were working with the British. So Putin has an understanding that these banking forces are out to destroy his country. All he has to do, he doesn't even have to go back 100 or 200 years, he can look at the Yeltsin years, when the City of London and people like Larry Summers, working together with Gore, sent in bankers from London and Wall Street to work with the KGB operatives to create the Russian oligarchy and try to steal all of Russia's material wealth. So Putin has an understanding of that. Now, look, if the key thing that you're saying on Putin, does he tell the truth? He levels with the Russian people. And after the Russian jet was shot down over Syria, Putin's popularity went from 88% to 92% in Russia. And these are Western polls. So he is speaking for this deeper sentiment of Russian nationalism, which is completely integrated with Christianity in Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church. Now, in this country, what does Obama identify with? Obama is literally a satanic figure, a man who brags that he's good at killing, referring to the drone policy, who made no reference when the Russian passenger jet was blown up by ISIS, supposedly our enemy. He never sent condolences to the Russian people, just a simple act. He's a narcissist. He has no empathy for anyone and no belief that he has to listen to anyone except the people who will ease his path. And that's the Valerie Jarrett's and the Cass Sunsteins and the others who are on the payroll of this oligarchy. So, the reason we're going after Obama is that people have to understand that he's acting against the Constitution and against our interests. Now, does that mean that other people who might take his place are different? No. It means the American people have to be different. We have to stop being suckers and stop being played by these satanic figures who are trying to crush the world's population and make virtually 99% of us into wage slaves and pawns.
Yeah, this is why I love you, Harley. I knew we could have this honest conversation and I could throw anything at you and get an honest response, because that's who you are, and you hit the nail on the head. There's a satanic influence here. And why do I say that? Because if you step back and you understand the truth, you understand that we're being lied to about ISIS, the foundation of ISIS, the funding of ISIS, the defeat of ISIS, which will never happen if we leave it up to the Pentagon and the White House. If you understand the basics, then you see these people go on CNN and you see their lies as they speak. They only speak lies. Who's the father of lies? Satan. There's a satanic influence here, and what made America great when our founding fathers gave us a constitution, we have lost, because the American people are standing down to the satanic influence either through willful ignorance or I don't know what. But
corruption.
Corruption.
The idea that there's somehow a safe zone for us. Somehow we can be protected if we keep our head down and just go about our business. But I just want to reference one example of a change. Wolf Blitzer was interviewing Tulsi Gabbard, and he was asking her about Syria, and she said it's an illegal war. And Wolf Blitzer nearly dropped his beard, and he said, "What do you mean illegal war?" And she said, "Neither the Congress nor the American people have authorized going to war against the sovereign state of Syria." Mm-hmm. Now, that's speaking truth to power. Mm-hmm. And that's what has to be done. This question of, LaRouche identified the satanic nature going back to Bush and Cheney. We put out a book in 2004, I believe, called The Children of Satan, about the neocons. Now, the liberal interventionists, the Samantha Power and the Susan Rice and Valerie Jarrett and Ben Rhodes, they're the same thing. There's no difference between them. They're all children of Satan. They've sold their souls for the idea that they're going to have a legacy, they're going to have money, they're going to have some participation in the ruling elite. And they don't realize they're just puppets. But you take out some of the puppets, and then some of the others start to say, maybe I shouldn't go along with this. By take out, I mean legally, constitutionally, defeat them, humiliate them. And the more people who identify this as a satanic force, as a scientific term, not just a Christian term, but a scientific term, anti-human, that's what we have to do.
You've taken the words out of my mouth, so I'll try to stop talking at this point because you've said it all. This is an anti-human force. I've been saying for a long time at this point in human history, it's the banksters versus humanity. And the banksters, quote unquote, is what Woodrow Wilson was talking about. But the internet and being able to have conversations like this and being able to have this burgeoning alternative media where truth is coming from, at least in this country, Harley, thank God for the alternative media, because if we left it up to CNN and Fox News, this information would never get out. And I want to thank you so much for your voice and for taking the time to join us today, Harley.
And I'd just like to say to your listeners, because I know that there are a lot of people who listen to you and take these things seriously and chew on them and talk about it, you have to get rid of your cynicism about the potential to win. We're our own worst enemy. We've accepted the idea that we're fighting a force that's too powerful. And that's how satanic forces succeed.
No, you're right. And I cite Putin and what he's doing on the global stage, and it is a stage, all the world's a stage, as one of my journalism professors once taught me back in college. All the world's a stage, but Putin is using his time on stage to speak truth. And he should inspire the rest of us to speak truth and stand up to power, because that's what he's doing on the global stage. That's what we should all be doing domestically, because these people need to be exposed for the satanic influence monsters that they are. Harley, is there any way that we can support you, direct us to your website or otherwise?
Yeah, just go to LaRouchePAC.com, because Lyndon LaRouche is another person who's dedicated his now 93 years to getting out the truth. And we put out videos, news stories. It's LaRouchePAC.com. And if people want to contact me, I've had a lot of good communication with your listeners. They can always send me an email at harleysch@gmail.com. That's harleysch@gmail.com. And I'll get back to them.
Yeah, and I thank you for that, Harley. And I do want to say one thing about our listeners. There are some really terrific, wonderful, good people out there that read SGT Report and listen to our interviews. And I just want to thank them personally. David Dees has been posting his artwork at SGT Report now exclusively. He just emailed me the other day. I did an interview with him not long ago, Harley, and he said never in all his years posting at Rents did he ever get the support that he's felt from the SGT Report readers. He sold more than 100 of his books after our interview, and it's really buoyed his spirits to keep going and keep fighting. And just in that way alone, people are making a difference and showing themselves to be true libertarians and true lovers of humanity. I want to thank everybody for that. And Harley, again, I want to thank you for your time and your voice. Our friendship means the world to me, and I think you're a terrific person, and thanks for all you do.
Okay, Sean, thank you very much, and I appreciate you very much, and I do appreciate your listeners, and sometimes I get a little hard on them because they seem to be defeated, but the vast majority of them want what's right, and if we can pull that together as a force, we can win.
All right. Well, and again, Harley, I think you probably hear from some of our more cantankerous readers. There are some very, very lovely ones out there who probably just haven't
the discussion.
Yeah, they haven't taken the time to reach out to you. All right. Well, guys, thank you so much for listening. We very much appreciate it. And thanks for your support at SGTreport.com, thephaser.com, and thelibertymill.com. Real news 24/7. God bless.